So, dig a bell, Robbie. All right, there you go, he bowed. All right, so let's go ahead and pray. Father, thank you so much for this. Thank you that you've given this to us. Thank you that you're teaching us through this. Father, the whole point is that we come to know you. Whatever we lose in ourselves is no big deal, because what we lose in ourselves, we gain in you. And that's what we need more than anything else, because more of you is always the best thing in the world. Help us to know you better. Help us to let go of ourselves so that we can come to know you better. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, well, but just to let you know, I got the newest paper out, just put it out on Saturday. I'm trying to do this every 3 weeks. This one is on merciful. So now if you've read the papers, which I hope you have, I literally am putting these out because I know Jeff is doing that, and so what I was thinking about doing is just doing some of these here in this class, so you guys will get some of this also. But I'm just specifically going through the Beatitudes, saying which of the first 10 verses in Matthew 5. So the big difference between mercy and meekness is what you do not do. Mercy is what you do. So, but I go into the lot, and thank you to people who have actually responded to me and actually read it already, which I'm pretty surprised people really do that. That's awesome. And that you're getting something out of it. If you're not on my mailing list, please let me know your email if you wish me just to send this out. I send them out every 3 weeks, and you guys will get that in your email. So, because once these classes end, these papers that I'm handing out most likely will end also, unless you guys want me to continue to do that. So, all right, let's go on. We're going to Judges. Now, one of the things that I wanted to share before we did Judges is I'm going to offer you folks a little bit of something to learn the Old Testament better. Now, I love the early church. I think early church writings is amazing, and please don't say, well, that's Catholic, we don't listen to that stuff. Trust me, God never changes. God is still working back then as he's working today. I actually found Clement's letter to the Corinthians, written in around 90 AD. Clement was a disciple of Peter. Okay? Polycarp was a disciple of John. Clement was a disciple of Peter. Okay? And so what Clement is doing at 90 AD is writing to the Corinthians, who, by the way, are still having issues. They never stopped. So Clement's writing to the Corinthians, and what I did is I've got this, and so it's going to have what Clement does, because you got to remember, in 90 AD, they did not have the New Testament yet. They had letters, they were all done, but they were scattered, and not everybody had them. So they had very minimal amount of stuff. So what he does what most of the other writers during this time did, is use the Old Testament almost exclusively. Now, granted, he is going to write stuff in the New Testament. You'll see a lot of New Testament stuff in it. But what he does in this long letter is he takes it and he literally takes the Corinthians through pretty much most of the Old Testament, naming off, you need to be like, he takes it, this is how you need to live. And he does all this Old Testament stuff. This is how you need to act. He does all this Old Testament stuff with some New Testament stuff put in there. And so what I'm going to do, if you're willing to do this, is I'm going to offer this, and if you want to learn the Old Testament, all you do is just take the paper and you just look up all the verses. Read it and look at the verses, and you'll be doing it for a little while because it's about 10 pages long, and it's very small. But the thing is, I have a feeling if you want to learn the Old Testament, this is a great method to pick up a bunch of stuff from the Old Testament and get yourself in there. If you're willing to do it. Now, it's going to take some work. So what you're going to want to do, if you are willing, this is what I do. God, I know for a fact I will forget about this and I'll never do this. However, I would like to do this, so would you please give me the desire to do it and the ability? Let me tell you, that's what I did with this paper. God, I have a lot of stuff going on. I don't know how I'm going to get that paper done. Can you give it to me? All of a sudden, a day later, I had it done in less than 2 hours. God it just was flying. And I'm telling you, God will do this. He does it. That's how I do it. Because I know for a fact I'm not going to do it. But I know his power is greater than mine. You ask him, he will give you a desire, and you will have such a desire, you can't stop. Trust me, it works good. Anyway, so let's move on to Judges. Samson. Oh boy, Samson. All right. Samson's an interesting guy. All right. On. Oop, I better put him up to on. On is always good. On works good, off does not. All right. So, Old Testament in action. I know that last week Jeff was teaching on the is also teaching the Old Testament, and he was talking how important it is to read the Old Testament. Now, I'm always going to say it is, because let me tell you, the best way to see God in action is seeing him through 2,100 years of history. Abraham all the way to Jesus. That's how you see God in action. You take it, he tells you what's going on, and you see him working through person after person after person. Once you read this and continue to read the Old Testament enough, you're going to do what I do. Every problem I have, I say, well, God did this for this guy and did this for this guy, and this guy messed up this way, but God did this with him. You're going to start seeing it that way, and you're going to say, wow, I know God's going to help me, because he helped this guy and this guy and this person, that person, that person. So we have to look at the Bible as one continuous message of God, that God never changes. Rather than a distant observer, he is a dynamic force, meaning he continually works. He is actively involved. I always say that God is actively involved in our lives and in these people's lives. Speaking creation existence, delivering nations from slavery, and establishing covenants. This active presence includes both dynamic miracles and deliverance from strict acts of justice. That's what the guy down there, he wrote this. And I thought it was an excellent statement, so I put it in there. So, God in action. If you want to understand God in action, now, we've got to know the New Testament. Don't get me wrong. I read the New Testament all the time. But if you want to, New Testament has around 30 years of time, okay? From about 30 to about, not even 30, I guess if you want to include all the way to John, it takes a little more than 30 years' time. But the Old Testament is 2,100 years. So you're going to see God in multiple ways. You want to see how God works in politics? Read the Old Testament. Let me tell you, the kings, they were politicians. All right, so let's talk about this. Now, the thing is, I've always told you guys, always make sure you read Genesis 48 and 49. If you want to understand the Old Testament, because when Jacob blessed his kids, he did so in a way that will actually come true, and we're going to look at that today here in a second. So I threw a couple of these guys in here just to kind of show you what it means. Simeon and Levi. I did this on purpose because let's read what it says. Their swords and weapons of violence. Let me not enter their council. Let me not join their assemblies, for they have killed men in anger and hamstrung oxen. That was what they did prior to this. Cursed be their anger so fierce and so fury. I will scatter them in Jacob and disperse them in Israel. That happened. Levites do not have a home of their own. They were scattered all the way through. Simeon, remember we talked about Simeon, it's bottom of Judah. Simeon kind of disappears because they literally get absorbed into everybody else. So in a sense, that's one of the reasons, even though Simeon is in Judah, whenever you have the split, Israel and Judah, you never hear of Simeon again. What I'm saying is, he was right. That's exactly what happened. Judah, your brothers will praise you. Hand will be on the neck of your enemy. Your father's sons will bow down to you. Boy, is that true. Anybody know who in the Old Testament guy from Judah was? Big guy in Judah? Who was from Judah? Big guy. David. The scepter will not depart from Judah. Scepter means kingship. That's true. Nor ruler staff from between his feet until he belongs and comes to obedience, the nation shall be his. Jesus comes from Judah. See what I mean? This is why it's important to understand, because this stuff really did, because when he did this, I really believe God was saying, this is what's going to happen for the most part. Now, the last one we're going to see is Dan. The reason why we're doing Dan is because Samson comes from Dan. Now, Dan ends up being one of the worst tribes, and it's considered one of the worst tribes in all of Israel. and we'll get to that next week. But Genesis, Dan will provide justice for his people as one of the tribes of Israel. And I believe that's specifically talking about Samson, because that's the only person that comes from Dan that really does justice, and he really does do the work. However, Dan will be a snake along the roadside, a viper along the path. Yikes. That bites the horse's heels. And the rider tells me, now this is, again, this is what they will become. I look for your deliverance, Lord. Now, I'm going to tell you something. When I read both those chapters, I went back through and read them again and said, he only says it here. I look for your deliverance? Oops. It's not going to be good. And so next week, buckle up, next week when we go see Dan, you're going to say, oh yeah, now I understand what he meant. So I'm just telling you because so the first part is Samson, the next part is next week. So, all right, that'll be fun to go. All right, so here's Dan. Now, granted, whenever you see most maps, you're going to see Dan in two places. Dan did not have two parts of the map. They didn't have two parts in Israel. None. They just had one. The second part is next week, because that's where they're going to migrate to, and it's not going to be pretty. So, for the most part, in Samson, right now, we see Dan, and again, the thing about Dan is literally Dan sits right above the Philistine cities. So, God putting Samson into there and Dan coming from was the right thing to do because it's literally right next to all the Philistine cities. Whereas Judah sits on the side of it and kind of a little ways, Dan is really right in the midst of it. And to be honest, they're going to migrate because of that fact. But we'll get to that next week. All right, God rarely does miracles the same way. Now, we're going to see God doing miracles in Samson, and it's going to be like, wow, that's different. I didn't see that coming. Because God does things differently. He never wants us to get used to him doing, because then we don't trust him. We don't trust him. And I put the fish in there because Jesus said, you need money? Go fishing. Now, granted, if they wouldn't have gone fishing, they wouldn't have got money. So they had to actually obey and trust in him. They did it. Oh my gosh, you open up, there he is. Ugly as can be, but there's a coin in there. It could be ugly, but it's a coin. So our Lord often changes the way he helps people perform his miracles. This is so the people will not trust in what they know, but what God will do. Okay? We're going to talk about this in just a second. This happens through many of God's people's in many of God's people's lives throughout the Old Testament and New Testament. It's also happened in my life. God said, I want to do something. There's been a few times in my life that I know for a fact the Lord put something really strong on my heart. And, well, I'll tell you the story. When I was really not even walking with God, turned away from him. But I flew into San Diego after getting out of the military. I was getting out of the military, and they lost everybody's bags. Everybody's bags. And here I am out of the military, which means I had zero things to my life. Because as we know in the military, they pack it all up and ship it to another state, but whatever you're left with is what you're going to have to live with for the next month or so before they get out. I had zero, and I was freaking out. And so I did what everybody does. God, I know I'm not walking with you right now. I'm not really doing, but would you help me? And I felt him say, it's here and it's here. It's here. And of course I didn't listen. So I went and I filled all the paperwork out. But he kept saying, it's here, it's here, it's here, it's here. I mean, it was there. I knew it was. I didn't do anything about it. So I said, okay. So I was walking down in the airport, and I felt, and they said, look over there. And I went over there. Out of nowhere, there's just this area with bags, with a rope around a bunch of bags, and a person standing there. I went up there. There it is. So the reality is, God does these things. You'll never know it. And even when I wasn't even walking, he still helped me in the midst of it. And but the good news is, think about it. I look back now and say, oh, you're so gracious. You were so gracious to me. You did not have to do this, but you did it anyway. So, how wonderful God is. So, 2 Kings. Now, this also happened to a guy named Naaman. Now, Naaman was not an Israelite, okay? He was from Syria. And Syria was attacking everybody and killing a bunch of people in Judah and Israel. They were very mean people. But this guy heard of Elisha. Elisha was a cool dude. Elisha will get you taken care of. Don't worry about it. So he came to Elisha, this commander. He came to Elisha and said, hey, Elisha, I got a problem. I got leprosy. And so what did Elisha do? Run away? No, he didn't do that. But the thing is he helped them. He helped them. He said, okay. He goes, so what do I do? He goes, all right, go to the Jordan, dip yourself 7 times in the Jordan. Now, this guy is a general, and we know, people from the military, we know you don't tell them what to do, they tell you what to do. And this guy said to him, yeah, whatever, dude. I'm not going to do that. That's stupid. And so one of his aides came to it and says, what do you expect the guy to do? If he tells you, if he just waved his hand and when it got you healed, he would have loved it. But it's not what he told you to do. He's like, maybe, sir, you should go dip in the water and just see, like he said, and you never know. It's not going to hurt anything. You're not going to die. So, of course, Naaman, that's what he did. Dipped himself 7 times. Now, you got to remember, the Jordan, depending on what time of the year, it sometimes gets pretty muddy. I remember I grew up in the mountains, so where a lot of runoff in the desert comes from. It's not the greatest in the world. But the thing is, he went in there, he dipped it, and guess what? Bam! The reality is, God uses different types of miracles at different times. So, please understand that. And that's what's going to happen with our guy today, Samson. So, Naaman got healed. He's a happy man. He's like, maybe I'll nix him. By the way, God actually used this for his benefit. It wasn't just something God just wasted on somebody. Naaman actually went back to the king up in Syria, and they mellowed out a little bit for a little while. So, yeah, God actually used it for his benefit. Anyway, all right, Samson broke all the rules. That's what we're going to see. But God achieved what he wished through him. So, in my opinion, Samson is like John McClane. If you ever watch the movie Die Hard, and what you see John McClane, everywhere he goes in every Die Hard movies, death and destruction follows him everywhere he goes. And that's kind of what happened with Samson. I call Samson a one-man wrecking ball. Okay? So one of the things we're going to see down the road is that Samson is going to tie 100 foxes together, light them on fire with sticks on them, and send them in their fields and destroy a bunch of stuff. You're going, what the heck? But it became effective, actually. So let's dig in. Samson's birth. Okay, so God came to a man named Zora, but actually he didn't go to Zora. He actually went to Zora's wife, who was childless, and said, hey, God's going to bless you, and I'm going to give you a son. However, there's one little thing you got to make sure you do. So it says, now, you are to see that you give him no drink. You're not to drink wine or any fermented, so no drinking. That's probably a good idea if you get pregnant. You got to stop drinking anyway because it's bad for the child. Anyway, his head is never to be touched by a razor because the boy is to be a Nazirite. Now, we're not talking Church of the Nazarene here. Okay, we're not talking about that. We're talking about the Nazirite creed in a sense, and we'll get to that in just a minute. So, and he will lead in delivering Israel from the hands of the Philistines. So he was going to be a judge, and he was going to deliver them from the Philistines. Now, here is the point. He will do it. Okay? Before we looked at all the judges, and they did it along with their armies. With these, they did a bunch of stuff. Even if it was only 300 men with Gideon, they still did it with a bunch of people. But nobody is going to help Samson. He's going to do it all by himself. So think about it. How do you deliver from a country? So for instance, it would be sending one person to deliver World War II from the Germans. He's going to take care of the Germans. One person's going to do it. And you're looking going, ain't no way you can do that. That's where the story begins, and let's begin. All right, here's the Nazirite vow. The thing is with Nazirite, you can't drink anything. You do not cut your hair, okay? The hair is very important. And do not touch a dead body, human or animal. Okay, that's very important. 3 things can't do for Nazirites. Now, most of your Nazirites are all going to be, they're all going to be temporary, other than 3 of them. 3 of them are going to be full-time, okay? But we'll get to that in just a second. So every time they touch a dead body, they can't even walk into a vineyard because you're going around grapes. You can't go to parties because you're going to be around fermented drink. You can't do it, so you can't do this. If you do any of these things, if you walk by a dead body, you've got to start over. You got to cut your hair, first of all. Here's the Leviticus. If someone dies suddenly and the Nazarene is present, defiling their hair. Now that's the point. Remember that, defiling the hair. Note the point of that. Please keep that in mind. They must shave their head on the 7th day. On the 8th day, they must bring 2 doves or 2 young pigeons to the priest, offer as a sin offering. Because they were a dead body, they must consecrate themselves again and must rededicate themselves and must bring a year-old lamb as a guilt offering. Dang! That's literally just walking near a dead body. So, they were hardcore. They didn't want to, so they were hardcore. But one of the things, it is a biblical tradition. Now, it doesn't say, it says dead body. It doesn't say dead animal. But most of the traditions, when I was reading what the rabbis said throughout most of the traditions of the Torah and everything, they believed it was either animal or human. So either one. Now that's why it's going to be important here in a minute when we get to Samson. Okay. All right. So, Samson's birth. The angel Lord appeared to Manoah. By the way, does anybody know any other Nazirites other than Samson? There's 2 major ones who were lifetime Nazirites. Any other Nazirites? Not Gideon. Gideon was a Nazirite. That was a good question. Good answer. But anybody else? Samuel was one of them. Samuel. John the Baptist was the other. John the Baptist. So, all right. So, but anyway, those guys were lifetime. By the way, so you know, they still believe in the Nazirites today. They're actually people still take Nazirite vows. So I don't know why, but they do. To each his own. All right. The angel Lord appeared to Manoah, and the wife was childless, like we just talked about. So he said, I'm going to give you a son. He's going to be a Nazirite. They then gave God the correct, unlike Gideon, they actually gave him the correct sacrifice. Put it on a rock, do all the things right there. By the way, God, another theophany God did was this. Now, I'm going through this quickly, and the reason is because Samson goes over about 4 chapters. So in our limited time, I'm just kind of going bullet points through it. So God was there. God spoke to them. Everything is. God accepted. The fire came down. So we know God accepted it. All right. She gave birth to a boy, and his name was Samson, and he grew up in the Lord. All right. Hey, does everybody like that? Do you guys like when I try to put original pictures on this? I try to get pictures from, the Flemish or Italian pictures. I don't know why. It just comes from college. I love that. It was so much interesting. Anyway, now, Samson wants a wife. Now, Samson is an interesting character because Samson, when he wants something, he doesn't say, hey, Dad, Mom, could you guys please help me get a wife? Nope. Samson tells his parents, I've seen a Philistine woman in Timnah. Now get her for me as my wife. Woo! That ain't good. But it's interesting is that they said to him, yeah, but dude, the thing is, you need to marry an Israelite. And that's true. Remember, we talked about that. One of the major problems Israel had over the years was they kept marrying out of Israel, and these people had brought them into idolatry. But we've got to remember, one thing is here. God sent him to take care of the Philistines. We're going to see a bunch of violations, bunch of things going on, but in the end, God did accomplish his goals. Okay? So by going to this Philistine woman, this is what starts it. He knew that, and Samson did what he was supposed to do. He went to her. So on the way there, I put in there, he somehow sees a lion, because in the story it says he was walking with his parents, he sees a lion, he kills it, and then he comes back and doesn't tell his parents he did it. How do you do that without telling your parents? I have no idea, that's why I said he somehow. Somehow he ran over here, killed the lion, and came back. Hey, Mom, I'm back. Hi. They had no idea he did this. Now, first and foremost, what's the problem with that? Pardon? It's a dead body. He just created a dead body. He's a Nazarite. Okay, so it's just good job. So then they walked down and they went to the woman and he liked her. He said, yep, I like her. I want this woman. So now I'll tell you a little about the Philistines, and it's actually a true story even today. Philistines are known for being very uncouth. Seriously, I'm not kidding. For even today, if someone calls you a Philistine, they ain't complimenting you. They're not complimenting you. They're telling you, well, you're kind of uncouth. Anyway, but it's true. I actually heard Letterman one time say, "You Philistine!" But the thing is, it's a well-known statement that people use that as Philistine. So I'm kind of make a joke when I'm doing this. But the key is that's kind of going to be important because you're going to see how the Philistines handle all of this stuff, and it's not a good thing. So Samson marries. He went there. And so before he went to marry, though, he went back with his parents. Somehow he escaped his parents again, found the lion's corpse, and found that there was a beehive in it. Now you may think to yourself, beehives don't go in corpses. But I did some research. Sometimes they do for temporary. So they do. There are some beehives that actually be found in corpses. But they're not always they don't like to do that because corpses usually are being, they get messed up with animals and stuff like that. So anyway, but they found the beehive and he scooped out honey and gave it to his parents, but again, did not tell them where it came from. This is going to be important in a second. So they gave him 30 companions. Don't ask me why. So you're getting 30 companions, and basically he had a bachelor party. There's his bachelor party right there. When your bride wants a redneck night instead of a dress-up night. All right, well that's the case because we're uncouth. So we got Samson and his companions. There you go. You love them. But by the way, check this out. I've also found historical evidence that I found what they did in their bachelor party. Do you know what they did on their bachelor party? This is great. They had a mullet contest. And so Samson had a mullet contest, and these are the winners of the mullet contest. I don't know why I put that in there. Anyway, that's just a joke. Okay, that's a joke. Yeah, here are the winners of Samson's mullet contest. Yeah. So only the best in your mullets. All right. Samson's riddle. Now, what they did is Samson said, I got a riddle, and in a couple days, if you answer my riddle, I'll give you 30 pairs of new clothes. He goes, I'm heading down to Macy's, and Macy's got a big sale, so I'm going to get you guys all new. No. But what he did, he said, I'm going to go and get you some new clothes. So that's cool. So they said, okay. He said, but here's the problem. If you don't tell me what I'm going to ask you, you owe me 30 pairs of new clothes. Yikes. Oh, okay. They're figured out. That's easy. Okay. So after the mullet contest, they're all talking about it, Then they go and say, all right. So he says, tell us the riddle. Now, guys, I want you to think about what Samson just did with the beehive. Now listen to this. Out of the eater, something to eat, out of the strong, something sweet. What's the eater? Lion. Something to eat. What was it? Honey. Out of the strong, something sweet, honey. Yeah. So basically, here's the point. No one knows he did that. No one cares. No one knows. They have no clue. So there's no way in the world, unless someone stumbles over that lion in that one place, that they're going to find out about this. Okay? So, of course, they could not figure out the riddle. So they did what any red-blooded American would do. Hey, you know what? They cheated. I'm just kidding. We wouldn't do that. But the thing is, they cheated. Now, this is where you're going to see them being a little uncouth. So, how did they cheat? Aha! They threatened his wife and said, "We will burn you and your father's household to death." Nice guys. Did you invite us here to steal our property? Now they're the dummies who said, "Hey, man, I'll do your riddle." Yeah, and they were the guys who went with it. But of course, when they realized there ain't no way they're going to win, so they threatened the wife, they threatened the dad. They did this. These guys were not very nice people. And I love this from Rembrandt. I'm a big Rembrandt fan. All right. His wife then goes and begs him to give her the answer. I don't blame her. She's going to die. His father's dying and everything else. Samson really knew what was going on. The people came back and gave him the very answer he told his wife. So yeah, he told his wife, and the people came back and said, "Oh yeah, hey, we know what it is. Oh yeah, something sweet, something to eat, yeah, that stuff." But like most men, Samson wanted to fix the problem. That's true. That's what we always want to do. Guys, we like to fix problems. Always not the best thing in the world. But he did it by becoming a human wrecking ball. So what he did is he said, "All right, you gave me the answer. I'll go get you your 30 pair of clothes. No big deal. I got you taken care of." So instead, he goes down to Macy's and buys them because he had a charge card, and that's actually not true. What he did was went a couple towns over and murdered 30 people and took their clothes. Now, this is going to increase. So please hang with me, because you're going probably when I first read Samson going, "Dang, dude, you got a problem." But remember, this is going to increase and increase, okay? So, Samson then was so mad after giving all this stuff and they did all this stuff, he just said, "Look, I'm going home for right now. I'll be back." He went home. Burning with anger, he returned to his father's home. And so guess what? The uncouth Philistines, showed their true colors. Samson's wife was given to one of the companions who threatened her. She married him. One of the guys who said, "We're going to burn you down." Yeah. It's like, okay, but you think that's going to make Samson happy or mad? Well, it's going to make him mad. Now remember, things are escalating. In the end, I'm telling you, in the end, God did accomplish everything. Okay? So stick with me. So when he goes, all right, when he's mad, he calmed down. He wasn't going to go and do anything else bad. He calmed down. He said, "All right, I'm going back." He said, "All right, Mom, Dad, let's go back and we'll talk to him." So when he went in there, they said to him, the dad said, "I'm sure you hated her because you left. You could have asked, but no, that would have been too easy." Okay, so, hey, by the way, take her younger sister. Hey, she's hotter than the other one. Now, so that was not a good thing. So you can see that the Philistines are just not they're doing terrible things, and Samson's a little angry by this. So needless to say, this made Samson mad. Samson said, "This time I have the right to get rid of the Philistines, to get even with the Philistines." I don't know if I can say that's the right, but I guess he kind of told himself that. Now, so what did he do? He went and caught 300 foxes. Whew, that must have been some work. tied their tails together in pairs, fastened a torch to every pair. Now, granted, the foxes probably did not die. I mean, so don't worry, don't pet people. No animals hurt in the making of this movie. So the thing is, most likely what happened was he just tied it to their tails are long and bushy. So the thing is, the torch is here. He ran through. Now, remember what we talked about a few weeks ago, that I said when you are demanding reparations from someone, or you're demanding them to pay money to you as the conquering power, you most likely are going to take their food, you're going to take their clothes, you're going to take everything they've got. So this is what the Philistines were doing to Israel. Guaranteed. It doesn't say in there, but I guarantee, because that's what they all do. They took their clothes, they took their food, they took everything, and the Philistines were just living in squalor, and they were scared to death of them, and we're going to see that in just a few minutes. So he went through, and not only did he burned up all of the grain, then he went and together the vineyards, all the so no more. So you can't eat. So then you can't have wine, the vineyards. And from there, he burned up all the olive groves. Can't have oil. That pretty much decimated their whole economy, at least for the places that he went. Now, by this time, I just want to remind you guys that God is still working in all of this, okay? God is still working. I don't understand why, but again, it's one of those things that's how God chose to do at this time. These guys, he just decimated their economy. He goes to different towns and takes care of business. Not that I'm saying it's right, but that's what's going on. So, the Philistines show their true colors, and they say, oh, who did this? Samson did this, he said. So the Philistines went up because they found out that God, see what happened is they found out that the dad gave Samson's wife to someone else. And they're saying to themselves, well, I don't blame them being mad because of that. So instead of going to Samson and say, dude, why did you do this? They could have went to Samson, but instead they're just like, okay. So what they did is go ahead and killed the woman and the guy and the dad and burned everything down from them. Murdered all of those guys. You're getting the point where Philistines are not they're a little uncouth, they're not the great people. So what he did, what did Samson do? He viciously slaughtered many of them. And then he went and hid in a rock. He just went away. So basically, he killed a bunch of them. But the reality is that the Philistine area is not that big. There's not much space there. There's only 5 major cities. And when he's doing all this stuff, he's doing it to multiple cities. He's already putting fear into them. Now remember, in the past, God just used armies to do it. Now he's using one guy. So the Philistines went to Judah because they said, well, let's go find Samson. Now granted, isn't it interesting, they didn't go to Dan. They went to Judah, which is literally east of them. Judah's directly east. So here's the Philistines right there, looking for him. Philistines were angry and went to Judah, demanding Samson give them over to them. Now, of course, because Samson is an Israelite, Judah was supportive and said, no, we're not going to do that. No, we're going to stand up with Samson. Oops, sorry, I don't know what I was thinking. That was the wrong story. Let's tell you the real story. No, that they didn't do that. 3,000 men from Judah went, 3,000 men. 3,000 men, who they could have attacked Philistines, but they didn't. But they went to Samson, 3,000 of them. Don't you realize that the Philistines are rulers over us? What did you do to us? Samson asked them, all right, guys, don't kill me. Because that looks like that's what they wanted to do. They're his own people. 3,000 of them. Okay. We will not kill you. So they bound him with ropes, led him from the rock, And they took him to the Philistines and said, gave him over. So here you go, you can give him. They literally sold out their own people. With 3,000. Now granted, here's the interesting story, is that the amount of Philistines that came were not even near 3,000, because this is what he did. He grabs a donkey's jawbone, and that's a picture of a donkey's jawbone, because you got to remember, donkey has a very large head, so the jawbone is this. That's quite the nice little mace there. He goes, grabs it, and he struck down 1,000 men. Now, here's the thing. Most likely, they didn't have that much more people than that there. Judah had 3,000. They were so afraid of these people, they just gave him over there. But God used him to do this, because by this time, do you not get that the reality is that Samson has put so much fear into the Philistines, they're going to cease and desist, which they did. So after it was all over, Samson was just extremely thirsty. And he said, God, I'm going to die here if you don't, and you got to remember, he's in the middle of the desert. Now, I went to college in New Mexico, and let me tell you, being in the desert, ain't nothing out there. And there's one thing that's really not out there, it's called water. They don't have much water out there. So what happened is, God always takes care of people. He actually brought water from a crevice, meaning that there's this big rock, and if you've ever been to the desert, they just have these rocks, and in between there's crevices when they just kind of break open over time, this crevice, and there's just nothing, it's dry, everything else, all of a sudden water starts coming out of it. That's what God does. Pretty awesome. And the spring's still there today, by the way. God still lets that spring run even to when the writer wrote this. Many times in the Bible, God gives water to the thirsty. Genesis, okay, he did that. Exodus, Numbers was when they did water from the rock through Moses. Judges, which is right here, 15, which is what they did. Okay, numerous times in Psalms, God talks about giving water to the thirsty, blessing people with water. 5 times in Isaiah, twice in Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Joel, Zechariah, all speak of water being a spiritual water. Okay? That God is going to quench our thirst with something more than just regular water. Now, why am I putting all that in? Why is all this stuff important from the Old Testament? Let me show you why. We should not be surprised when Jesus speaks of himself as living water. Because that's what it was. God, living water, what the true meaning of living water was meaning flowing water from a river. By the way, in the Didache, if anybody knows what the Didache is, the Didache was an early Christian writing to teach people about things. What they said they believed at that time, the best way to baptize someone is in living water, meaning in a stream or in a river, because it's flowing, it's living, because that's what Jesus talks about. Living water means flowing river that does not stop, okay, a river. So Jesus says, those who hunger and thirst for righteousness will be filled. By the way, that was one of the papers. I think that was about 3 papers ago one of my papers I wrote 3 papers ago. And how will that happen? Jesus says, everyone who drinks this water will be thirsty again, but whoever drinks what I give them, indeed the water will become like a spring of water. Spring means spring of water, flowing, living water coming out of someone. The key is, one would not truly understand this unless they read the Old Testament. So unless you get the Old Testament, this is not going to mean a whole lot to you. Once you get the Old Testament involved, and how many times God said, this is what I'm going to give you down the road, and that's exactly what God did, then you're going to understand how things work together. We're almost done. Okay, so after Samson decimated the Philistines, he led Israel for 20 years. So basically, 20 years he led Israel, which means by that time, he literally wiped out, he got them, they were completely coward, the Philistines. They stopped. meaning that everything God did to this point was meant for a reason. Whether we may not like what God did, we may not like how things happened, but God did do it. However, Samson was a hero, but sadly, as with most humans, he will lead him down a very dark path. Because next week, what we're going to talk about is Samson the anti-hero. We're going to finish this. We have a little bit left of Samson before we get into going into Dan and all that stuff. The thing is, Samson went to Gaza. He saw a prostitute. He spent the night with her. They surrounded the palace. Now, think about this. We're almost done. Gaza, very end city, bottom of the Philistines, way, way south. What the heck was he doing there? Now, you want to say, what an idiot? Yeah, they hate the guy. They want to kill him. He decimated their fields, decimated everything. And now he goes to a prostitute down there. We're going to see that Samson, after this, did his own thing. Samson was reckless, and he was kind of like a bad horror movie. And that's what we're going to deal with next week, Samson the horror movie, because we're going to deal with him and Delilah. All right, just one more time, I'm going to remind everybody, please, can you make sure, if you want the Clement paper that I'm going to give that's going to take you through the Old Testament, please let me know. If no one comes to me and asks me, then I won't do it. I think actually one person actually did, so I will do it. So if you want it, please let me know. If you don't have the newest paper, please let me know, and please give me your email address so I can send it to you. Thank you very much.